Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Three Things Chats That Inspire, where I have an awesome opportunity to talk to very cool people about things that are important. And today, I would like to introduce you to Tim Geoffrion. I'm very happy that you're here, Tim. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. Let me give you a bit of an introduction. So Tim is an executive coach as well as a small business consultant. And several years ago, after a particularly hard period in his life, he discovered the transformational power of slowing down. And that's what we're talking about today, is slowing down the conversation. At that time, he left his career for 2 years to travel and photograph all of America's national parks, which I find amazing. What he found on his journey changed the way that he understood himself, the world around him, and his place in it. So what a fascinating time you must have had.
Oh yeah, definitely.
How cool. And I've looked at your photographs on your website. They're astounding and beautiful. So in beginning our conversation about slowing down the conversation, I have a question for you, which is, why is that so challenging and sometimes scary and can be so difficult? Why is it so difficult to slow down?
I can't speak for other people, but I know for myself, I've been in a lot of situations, especially in the business world, where I'll enter into a conversation. I might feel anxious about the outcome. And maybe I prepared a lot for that conversation, and I'm really hoping for a specific thing to happen as a result of the conversation. And so in my brain, I've got this whole script on
Yeah.
how things are supposed to happen. And I really don't want us to get off the script. And so I have all this anxiety that we're going to get off the script in the form of the conversation. And so I can be really laser focused
Mhm.
on what is it that's in front of me? How do I manage the risks that come up? How do I stay on plan? How do we make sure that I get the outcome that I want? I mean, especially early in my career, I remember, sometimes your boss would tell you, well, you need to talk to this customer, or you need to talk to this investor, and you need to make sure that you get X, Y, and Z as a result of the conversation. And so just remember feeling all the pressure and the stress of that going into the conversation. And so I naturally would feel the urge to rush through it as quickly as possible to limit anything wrong from happening.
Right.
So I thought if I could just move the script along and get to the right outcome as quickly as possible, that's how I could protect myself.
I so get that. I know that for me, in conversations, even with friends and family, and especially with my daughter when she was like a teenager, I would have a vision for that outcome. And anything that took it off track that I didn't know how to handle was like so activating.
Totally.
So I get what you're talking about. So let's start with your three things. And your
Yeah.
first one is right here.
Yeah, so my first one is, it's helpful to slow down first to understand yourself. And so for me, I learned this both tactically in conversations, but also just about myself when I'm going into a period that I expect is going to be really important or stressful. Actually slowing down really helps me get much better outcomes because I start by understanding myself in a more holistic way. There's sort of three components to that. The first is a nervous system piece, which is a dysregulated brain can't get out of the amygdala. So, you live in your fear, flight, freeze response when you're dysregulated, and that can feel like a very fast moving place. And the only way to get into higher brain functioning, things like critical self reflection, or empathy with others, is first by calming down your nervous system, which for me involves getting grounded and slowing down.
Perfect.
So I have to slow down before I go into the conversation so that I can be grounded in the conversation. Secondly, I slow down because it helps me then have the space to really get in touch with my hopes and fears for the conversation and attend to them instead of being controlled by them. In the case of that business conversation I talked about earlier, if I went into that conversation really fearful that the client that I was talking about wasn't going to buy my product that I was trying to sell them. The whole conversation, I might just be looking for, oh my gosh, he's not going to buy, he's not going to buy. What am I doing to sell him? And then just be so controlled the whole time by that fear, instead of taking the step back and really understanding, why am I trying to sell? What is it that I have to offer? And how can I best show up in a way that's representative of what I'm trying to communicate with this person that I'm talking to about, instead of just trying to mitigate my fears. So
Yeah.
slowing down for me helps me get regulated to know myself so that I can really show up and speak for what's true versus speaking out of my fears.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you went back to your why of, why am I doing this? What are the benefits for the other person?
Right.
Rather than operating from that fear that they're
Yeah.
not going to do what you hope that they do. That makes so much
Absolutely.
sense. And do you find in the conversation that it isn't, you prepare, and then once you enter it, it may be a little like flexibility there of, oh, I need to regulate here. Here's a place where I start to feel a little activated. I need to, I want to regulate myself. So this kind of constant or periodic, at least, re-regulation of your nervous system.
Totally. For me, slowing down is something that has to happen both before the conversation and then continually throughout the conversation.
Yeah.
Because absolutely, at least for me, there's plenty of points in many conversations, particularly ones that are important or emotionally complex, where I can get dysregulated again. But I know from experience, if I am intentional in those conversations about noticing that when I get dysregulated, it's helpful for me to slow down before continuing to move with speed. I'm usually able to show up in those conversations in ways that I feel much happier about after the conversation's over.
Definitely. I so get that. And will you say a little bit about this photograph? It's stunning. This
Oh
is your
yeah,
photograph.
absolutely. This was a photograph of the Grand Canyon. It's the south rim of the Grand Canyon at sunset.
Mm.
In the foreground there, you can see that protruding rock face with lit up by the sun. So the sun is almost gone over the horizon at this point, and you can see in the distance as well, there's just a few places that are still being hit by sunlight and getting lit up with those beautiful reds and yellows. And in the foreground, if you look very closely, there's an individual who's standing out there on that point by himself. I don't know who that individual was, but as I was just enjoying this beautiful sunset that night, I saw this individual walk out there to a place that really no one should have been, but it made for a stunning photograph and gave perspective to me on this whole thing. But I think actually, if we talk about slowing down, there's a piece of that here too, which is, for me, just even watching this individual walk out there on that rock was a very dysregulating experience. And I felt my heart racing and I wanted to do things quickly. And it's hard to tell here, but he was actually so far away, this individual couldn't have heard me if I screamed to him. But as I watched him, he was walking very slowly, very deliberately, very in control. And so, his choices may be beyond my risk threshold, but he was able to walk out to a place that was very dangerous from my perspective safely, because he walked out there very slowly. He knew what his limits were, he knew what the risk was, and he was able to protect himself by moving slowly out to that point.
And that makes so much sense to me. And the timelessness and of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
All of that erosion happened over such a long period of time. It was a slow process that then created this magnificent wonder of the world. The Grand Canyon is one of the wonders of the world, right? Is it?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't know if it's officially on a list, but it's on my list.
It's on my list too. It's astounding. All right. So number 2.
Yeah, so my second one is slow down to understand others. And this is a picture of a national park actually off the coast of Florida that very few
Mhm.
people have heard of, called Dry Tortuga.
I have heard of
Um,
it.
yeah, it's a huge mason fort just in the middle of the ocean that never actually got completed, but cost an absolute fortune to build. And now it's a sanctuary for migrating birds, but you can go out there and explore the national park and see the beauty of what's under the water as well as what's over the water. And in the corner of this picture, you can see these two individuals who are snorkeling in that pristine, clear water and getting to see the fish and the corals that are developing on our, uh, you know, huge battle, Mason built facility here from 150 years ago. But here slowing down for me is giving you the opportunity to see the world in a new way. And if I go back again to that business conversation, when I'm rushing through the business conversation, I'm probably not getting all of the data that's available to me in that conversation. And it may be that if I was open to getting more of the data, there might be other outcomes possible that I didn't imagine. And there might be motivations that are impacting the person who I'm talking to that aren't obvious
Yeah.
at first. And so it's in the slowing down the conversation for me and in the creating space for the other person to reveal themselves. And the way that I do this is by asking a lot of questions. So I like to ask why a lot when I'm talking to people as a way to get to know them and get to know what's important to them. And it takes me out of the transactional nature of the relationship and slows it down in a way that I really get to relationally know the person that I'm speaking to. And as a result of that, like, can end up discovering some pretty wonderful things that really change the whole nature of the conversation and the relationship.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. And your number three.
Yeah, number three is a result of the first two things, which is when I slow down enough myself to get my brain regulated, to know my why, and to speak from my why, then I'm more likely to be able to create the space for me to really see the person that I'm talking to in a way that I wouldn't have before. And then from that more open-hearted, curious place of observation, there's an opportunity I've often found to really connect with somebody in a very different way than I might have imagined I was going to connect with them at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, that
On
so
my journey, I
allows.
experienced this really powerfully the very first day of my journey when I went on a cab ride to the airport, and I was in my head about the journey that I was about to have. And, I think I was probably polite to my taxi cab driver because my mom taught me to be polite to every person you meet, but I didn't really want to have a conversation with this person. And he sort of said something really unexpectedly after being quite annoying for a few minutes that really kind of caught me off guard. And suddenly we had this beautiful conversation that lasted 30 minutes all the way to the airport. And he really gave me a new frame of understanding the whole journey that I was about to go on. But if I wouldn't have had this moment that actually like broke me out of my script that, oh, this is a taxi cab driver, this is the moment to be pleasant to someone, I have other things to think about, and instead slowed me down enough to really see, oh my goodness, like, this is another human being looking for connection. I have the space to connect, and wow, we have so much in common. I didn't realize it. I wouldn't have had this conversation that ended up being very informative. So that's a very small example, but I've certainly experienced that too, in relationships with family members and with my romantic partner and with friends as well, where I might come in to a conversation with a very specific agenda for something, but when we're able to create the space to both be regulated and both observe each other in new ways and get to know what's truly important to each other. Sometimes some really transformational things in our relationship can come out of those moments.
That's wonderful. And where is this photograph?
This is in Yosemite National Park. It's on a place called Taft Point, and that's my brother and I up there, and we are both terrified of heights. And I don't think that either one of us fully realized just how sheer that drop was. If you were able to zoom this back, that drop actually goes about 2,000 feet straight down from there. And so it makes for a great photo, but I'll tell you what, we were pretty darn scared when we were taking it.
Well, I share that fear of heights with you, so I get it. Yeah, and I remember doing some hikes there where you hold on to chains to walk on the path.
Yeah,
because it's sheer.
Yeah.
And yeah.
This one did not have a chain, but I sure wish it did.
Some kind of anchor.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That's just beautiful. So I want to let everybody know here where they can find you at thiswalkinglife.com and check out Tim's photographs. Where is this one, Tim? That's gorgeous.
That's actually in a portion of Sequoia National Park that very few people go to. Most people go only to the ancient tree groves, which are some of my very favorite places on earth. But there's actually another portion of the park in the High Sierra that's extremely rocky and remote. And this is one of those places. But yeah, one of the most beautiful places I think I've ever been.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Wow. So I want to remind everybody that we have Slowing Down the Conversation, a live virtual workshop with me right there. It's happening on Saturday, April 9th, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon, that should be Eastern time. It's 10 a.m. Mountain time. And I hope you'll join me. If you just go to wholeheartedparenting.com and click on shop, you'll see all of our virtual workshops out there, including this one. So Tim, thank you. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You are welcome.